Hello and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. If you would like to listen to this meeting in Spanish, click on the Zoom link in the chat box in WOVA. And interpreter, would you like to speak in Spanish, please?
Aquí the message. Si desean escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor, haga clic en el icono de abajo y seleccione español. Gracias.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. My name is Jason Lowe, and I will be your moderator for this breakout session, Community Air Monitoring. Before we begin, I will briefly review some housekeeping items for the meeting. Please be aware that this video conference meeting is being recorded. By participating in this webinar hosted by South Coast aqmd, you agree to authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast aqmd. Now that we have reviewed those housekeeping items, I would like to share a bit about myself. I am the Deputy Executive Officer of the Monitoring Analysis Division. I oversee the South Coast aqmd ambient air network of over 40 air monitoring stations, the laboratory, source test operations, and numerous special air monitoring projects focusing on air toxics and the local impacts of air pollution, especially those in environmental justice communities. I am honored to be joined today by an esteemed group of professionals who are dedicated to the community and to the fight for clean air. This panel will focus on low-cost air quality sensors, including how effective they are in measuring pollutants, real-world costs, infrastructure needs, and other challenges, and what can be learned from the data. As Rob Banta, our featured speaker, indicated, much of what we do is evidence-based, and having a data solution for which community air monitoring has a strong role in providing that information. With that, I'm hoping by the end of this session, we can come away with better understanding on the types of technologies that are available and how they can help us improve air quality within our communities. Joining me today for this important panel are Dr. Andrea Polidori, the Director of Monitoring Analysis for the Monitoring Analysis Division at South Coast aqmd, Dr. Todd Heibel, Geography Professor and Co-Chair for Architecture, Spatial and Environmental Sciences at the San Bernardino Valley College, and Dr. Yifeng Zhu, Professor of Environmental Health Sciences and Senior Associate Dean for Academic Programs in the Fielding School of Public Health at UCLA. We will give our panelists a few minutes to introduce themselves and briefly share about their current work. We'll begin with Dr. Andrea Polidori. Please just take this time to introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Jason, and good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here today. My name is Andrea Polidori, Director of Monitoring and Analysis in the Monitoring and Analysis Division at the South Coast aqmd. I've been with the district for about 13 years, and I've been involved in several projects. I've been working quite a bit with local communities, and I have quite a bit of an interest in understanding the capabilities of these low-cost air quality sensors for monitoring air quality. And so later on, I'll also introduce our Air Quality Sensor Performance Evaluation Center, what we do, and why our activities are important to produce information that the public can use to both select and appropriately utilize this new technology for community monitoring and different other purposes. I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it back to Jason.
Great, thank you. Dr. Heibel, would you please share a little bit about yourself and background, please?
Hi, good morning. Hi, good morning. I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much for inviting me today, and it's really an honor and a pleasure and a privilege. So as Dr. Lowe mentioned, my name is Todd. Heibel is my last name, and I first of all want to let you know I'm also here to learn and listen as well. So I have some things to say, but I really do want to hear from you all and your good questions, and also those of my my panelists, colleagues as well. I'm looking forward to learning. Well, as mentioned, my name is Todd, and I'm a faculty at San Bernardino Valley College since August 2004. I'm also a co-chair of several departments that include architecture, environmental science, geography, geographic information systems. Some of you may have heard of GIS, and geology. And what I really love about these programs, they all relate directly implicitly and explicitly to air quality and environmental justice, really looking at that interface of the built and the natural environment. And so that's really where I'm coming from today, as an educator, but also a community member. And again, environmental justice and air quality are really near and dear to my heart. And I'm also part of a science division that includes the health sciences. So there's also that interest and aspect of public health. And I know we have a panelist that's also going to speak more on the topic of public health and specifically the impacts of air quality on public health. So kind of in conclusion, although my students and I are focused on the spatial or mapping aspects of air quality monitoring, the goal really is to make this as interdisciplinary as possible, engage as many different programs within our science division and across our campus, because it's going to take all of us. And importantly, because our students are community members, they really are the gatekeepers who are going to interface with our community to improve our geography, if you will, of air quality monitoring. And again, just, we are a community college at San Bernardino Valley College. And so really it is placing the community first. So I'm really excited to present, but also to listen and learn on this panel. So thank you so much.
Great, it's a pleasure to have you here, and definitely appreciate you bringing in the community and education perspective. And also, I love that you do the mapping, because that is a huge tool for bringing awareness to air quality issues. With that, I'll pass it over to Dr. Yifeng Zhu to introduce herself.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. Good morning, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be here to attend this very important environmental justice conferences. As Jason mentioned, my name is Yifeng Zhu. I'm a professor of environmental health sciences at UCLA Fielding School of Public Health. So my research focuses on air pollution, climate co-benefits, and aerosol technology, specifically interested in particular matters in the air that people breathe and expose, and what are the related health effects. I'm also very interested in working with community members and trying to design mitigation measures to help reduce exposures and protect public health. And specifically to air sensors, especially low-cost air sensor research. Recently, Dr. Polidori and I had jointly studied EPA STAR grant to set up community monitoring using low-cost sensors. We have done community monitoring using low-cost sensors, ranging from looking into freeway emissions to wildfire emissions. So be happy to share some of those experiences today with the audience. With that, I'll pass it back to Jason. Thank you.
Great, and thank you. It's great to have you here to connect the air monitoring data to public health. So we have a very distinguished panel here, and definitely excited to hear what they have to say to some of our topics that we have. So let's begin with some basics about low-cost air monitoring. Let's start with a question. This will be pointed to Dr. Polidori and Dr. Zhu. What is the purpose of an air monitor, and what types of data do low-cost air quality sensors collect, and how can we use this information to keep residents informed about their local air quality? I will start with Andrea.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Jason. So some introduction about the world of low-cost sensors. Because of recent technological advancements, manufacturers have begun marketing low-cost air monitoring sensors to measure air pollution in real time. This technology has been evolving rapidly during the past 5 to 10 years. And right now, there are many different types of commercially available sensors. These devices, these low-cost sensors, range in price between $50 to $100 to about, the upper range. Let's say it's about $2,000, or more, depending on the type of sensors considered. But in general, they are a lot more affordable than the more sophisticated EPA-approved instruments that are required for regulatory monitoring for an agency like ours, like the South Coast aqmd. Given their low cost, these sensors are becoming an attractive means for local environmental groups and individuals to independently evaluate air quality. However, low-cost sensors have several intrinsic limitations. For example, they are not as accurate and reliable as EPA-approved instruments. I mean, of course, here we are comparing, low-cost sensors, a few $100s, to more sophisticated EPA-approved equipment that can cost $20,000 or more, right? So there's a different sophistication that also equates in a different level of reliability. Low-cost sensors, the performance over time of low-cost sensors is typically not tested. Even if they, perform well during the first few months, there's not enough information about their long-term performance that generally, degrades with time. Usually, low-cost sensors are not calibrated by the manufacturer prior to shipment, and those also, present some challenges. And usually, the manufacturer does not provide a standard operating procedure on how to operate, the sensor, or guidelines on how to analyze the collected sensor data. So despite of these limitations, several available low-cost sensors are very helpful for community groups, citizen scientists, and member of the public for various applications. And these include complementing air quality information from regulatory air monitoring networks, studying the temporal and spatial distribution of criteria pollutants such as PM2.5, ozone, and other air pollutants, characterizing emissions from specific sources of air pollution, assessing personal exposure, and also educational purposes. Even sensors that provide just basic air quality information with a modest level of reliability are also very useful for educating, the younger generation on what air pollution is. So I don't know, Jason, if you want me to go into kind of the second part of the question, or maybe if you want, some other of the panelists also to chip in.
Yeah, why don't we move over to Dr. Zhu to be able to comment?
Sure. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Andrea. So the purpose of air monitor, I think it really depends on the user. Like for South Coast, I guess you guys are using the air monitors for compliance purposes, right? You need to know the air quality data to be able to, make decisions about whether a certain air quality district is in compliance or not in compliance with EPA standard. I think I want to share a little bit more from the health aspect and also from communities aspect. In health studies, air pollution related health effect studies, we need to conduct air monitoring just to provide information about to what extent people are exposed to different type of air pollutants. And that information is important to understand the health effects, to study the dose responses. And those are very critical information to really demonstrate that exposure to certain air pollutants are having substantial adverse health effects. We need to know how much people are exposed to. So that's one aspect. And for the community aspect, they may not conduct a health study on their own, but they can use those air monitoring data to inform their decisions. They can know if their community is in green, yellow, or red in terms of air quality index they're familiar with, and they can use that to advocate for themselves, to reach out to Jason and Andrea to share their concerns about the air quality in their neighborhood and in their communities. And they can also use those air monitoring data, low-cost data, even though there may not be, they're not, compliance, EPA compliance purposes, but they can be used for personal decisions and to implement some mitigation measures that they do have control over. Like for example, close windows or turn on air purifiers, or actually open windows and turn off air purifiers. So there are things I think those low-cost air quality sensors can provide. The data they provide is really just most of the time real-time air quality pollutant concentrations. And we'll dive into deeper dialogue as this panel continues. But I'll just stop here and see if there's any other thoughts from other panels, or go back to Jason.
Sure, thank you. Maybe Andrea will talk a little bit more about the different types of monitors. This is focused on low-cost sensors, but I think it's good to put in perspective on the greater perspective of what technologies are available in the air monitoring world, especially when we talk about community air monitoring. So, Andrea, maybe you want to expand upon that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that one key point here is that the type of technology has to be appropriate for the intended purpose, right? I think in terms of low-cost sensors, I mean, again, it's not just the cost factor that determines the performance, but it's also the type of information that the sensor provide. As I mentioned before, if a community groups purchase a sensor that is just $50 and provide very basic information about the ambient concentration of, let's say, PM 2.5, that can be used in a classroom setting to explain air quality concept and to introduce the classroom and the younger generation to air quality. But some of the especially more modern air quality sensors, some of them are also starting to measure volatile organic compounds, some air toxics, and they have a different degree of sophistication, right? So if, let's say a community group would like to determine potential emissions from, let's say an oil and gas wells, it's still, the technology is still quite not there, but there are different tools that are now available that can be used at least to get an idea as to whether or not there are emissions coming out from an oil and gas well, a tank, or some other potential sources of emissions. So I think again here the key point is that and this will come up later in answering some of the other questions. The selection of a particular sensor is intimately related to their specific purpose and to the type of information and complexity of information that these sensors can provide.
And that's a perfect transition to our next question, which is please share highlights from current and or previous community air monitoring efforts. And specifically, maybe we'll start with Dr. Zhu. What type of air monitors are recommended for community members?
Thank you for the question. That's a very important question. And the question really depends on what the community members are really interested in. It really ties into the emission sources that most concerned, among those community members. Like, for example, if there's community that lives near freeways, they may concern about traffic emissions. And we just heard from the opening remarks and mobile source emissions, not just from tailpipe, but also from non-tailpipe, brake and tire wear particles. As I mentioned briefly, the EPA STAR project that Andrea and I worked on, we actually successfully used those low-cost air sensors to identify or to sort of demonstrate that those sensors can be used to illustrate the traffic emissions from freeways. It does involve lots of data analysis, but it can be used in that sense. And if communities, as you mentioned, that are near refineries, they're more like concerned about volatile organic compounds, then they will use different type of sensors. So generally speaking, I think right now in the market, there's PM sensors, and there are gas and volatile organic type of sensors. My sense is the PM sensors are better developed, more advanced than the gas phase and volatile organic sensors, compound sensors. So I think really want to encourage if there's a tech persons and companies and industries here to think about like how to address those concerns, and that some community members are really interested in.
Great, and thank you for providing some of the practical examples in that selection. Dr. Polidori, would you like to also respond to that? So again, what type of air monitors are recommended for community members?
Yeah. And I think this would be a good time to introduce to the audience our Air Quality Sensor Performance Evaluation Center program. So starting in 2014, basically the South Coast aqmd developed a center for testing the performance of commercially available sensors, low-cost sensors. So what we do within AQ Spec I mean, essentially, we do a very comprehensive field and laboratory testing of all of the commercially available sensors that we can find, of course. And, you know, this is a very, you know, if you visit our website, you can find information about the results of our performance evaluation, the different type of sensors commercially available, the different manufacturers that, you know, make these type of sensors, so that you can get, you know, a better sense of what's out there, and you know, that can give you, you know, actionable information for selecting one or more sensors for your specific community study or community project. Yeah, so, and you know, there's a lot here to discuss, and definitely I would like also to hear from my fellow panelists. But one of the things that I wanted also to clarify is that it's very important to, you know, that the sensor that you select is extremely important for the success of your study. And there are multiple criteria for selecting the right sensor for the right purpose. Some of them, and I will just list them quickly, and, you know, for my fellow panelists, please feel free to kind of elaborate on that. But it's extremely important to select the sensor that, of course, measures the pollutant or pollutants you're interested in. It has to be relatively easy to use. Most of the time, communities, they have some technical expert, but not all of the community members are, you know, technologists. Power requirements is another important feature of a good air quality sensor. I mean, of course, if you are in an industrial area or in a residential area, you have access to power. But if you would like to deploy the sensor in the middle of an open field and you have no power, then you need to have a solar power panel or some other source of electricity. The data streaming is extremely important as well. So if you have access to Wi-Fi, you can select a sensor that, of course, streams the air quality data to a computer. If you don't have access to the internet, then you need to rely on a memory card that is often available, you know, that comes with the sensor device. Durability, cost, and other technical, you know, consideration are also very important, you know, depending on the budget that you have. I mean, of course, if your budget is limited, you cannot, or you would not want to select a very, or relatively, you know, expensive sensor, right? So these are all, you know, kind of preliminary idea to give you to give you kind of the sense of what's available and the type of thinking that as a community member you would want to basically do, you know, as you basically approach and you design your air quality project.
Great, thank you for all the extra information supporting air monitoring as well, not just the sensors, but everything else that goes along with it. Let's transition to the practical deployment. So Dr. Heibel, what were the results from your community air monitoring efforts?
Hi, so thank you. So it's good. I'm listening and learning. So this is instructive for me as well. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I will say that this is kind of forecasting a bit into the future. So we are just in the nascent stages of pulling this all together on the San Bernardino Valley College campus. So again, although we've not yet operationalized community-based air sensor network and associated citizen scientist air quality data collection, we fully anticipate students and community members to be empowered with these data. So again, just kind of getting into agency. So rather than passively reacting to poor air quality, students and community members can be proactive agents. And just kind of sort of back to the first topic, but also related to this, you know, we really want to the fullest extent possible, we don't want to unduly burden our community members with financial costs, but also we don't want to burden them. And this is so great to hear from Dr. Zhu and Dr. Polidori, you know, talking about cost, but also training. You know, we also want to avoid that information overload when we deploy these studies and these sensors. So we want to partner with local agencies like the AQMD and other agencies, as well as leverage grant funding to purchase these air quality monitors. So again, this is not something where community members are having out-of-pocket expenses. We also want to have our San Bernardino Valley College students as gatekeepers, as community members to work with the community, to train the community. So this is kind of a, if you will, an educational win-win strategy. So the students are becoming empowered, not simply as students, but as educators, as experts, as gatekeepers. And our community members are being empowered with these data, how to not only respond and monitor data, but to contribute kind of a crowdsourced map, a data network. So again, our some of the long-term goals related to that, we would like to host non-credit courses on our campus for anyone, for community members at no cost, at times that are convenient to them, to become trained citizen scientists as part of an community air quality monitoring network. So non-credit courses. So and one more thing I wanted to say, in addition to interfacing with the community, students and faculty will construct and maintain, there's a software package called Arcgis. It's basically computer mapping that would be available on mobile devices and computers that will receive and report real-time air quality data. So it would be an interactive community air quality map that would be presumably hosted on our San Bernardino Valley College website. So this website is in the public domain. It's freely available for community members. And I guess one last thing, that this may be more of a question for my fellow panelists. Are there, I've just begun searching mobile-based applications. So we, Dr. Polidori, you were mentioning some of the power limitations, either solar panels or plugged into a house circuit. Are there, mobile phone technologies? Because that's something that, again, I'm trying to stay in my lane here as an educator. So Dr. Zhu, Dr. Polidori, is that a technology that could be used? Because if we really want to democratize this to the fullest extent possible. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Dr. Polidori, would you like to respond?
Yeah, and I think that, well, the word mobile, maybe Dr. Abel, I would need a little bit more of a clarification. There's two things that come to mind in terms of pure mobile application. And that, one of the things that we are quite interested in at AQSpec is how to use some of the commercially available sensor technology on a mobile vehicle. You would need to clarify, Dr. Abel, if that's exactly what you had in mind, but I think this is also gives me the opportunity to, kind of expand on some of the applications that, we are looking at under AQSpec. So we have developed a mobile vehicle that is outfitted with EPA-approved instruments to basically test the ability of some of these low-cost sensors to measure accurate air pollution information as we drive them around on the mobile vehicle. There's different considerations essentially trying to characterize the performance of these sensors devices in a mobile settings, where you place them on the vehicle, the type of information that that they basically collect, how to make sure that basically the airstream enters the sensors in a way that produces reliable data, and other technical consideration. By the way, this is also some of the information that you can find on the AQSpec website, but it's something that is extremely important because, as you can imagine, there's big companies such as Google, for example, that are very much interested in this type of discussion. And as the technology, progresses, there's more and more companies that are very much interested in using sensor technology for collecting air quality data using, a whole fleet of different vehicles, their own fleet, even installing some of the census devices on top of taxis or public transportation. So the amount of information that will be generated through the use of mobile monitoring, is only going to expand in the future, right? So it's important to keep an eye on this discussion. So I think that, that was a very good question. I hope that's what you intended, and I hope that I provided a decent answer.
No, and if I may, just one quick interjection, then I'll mute myself again. So absolutely, and that's wonderful that this is something that could also be deployed on taxis, perhaps buses, but also, and we can chat about this later. Even using mobile phone devices as part of a cellular network to again sort of free ourselves from the burden of tethering it to a cord. But thank you. But that's very instructive. Thank you.
And I will give you a very, very brief answer there. I mean, definitely a lot of the the latest sensor devices are connected, can be connected to a phone. A lot of the manufacturer and vendor have developed, specific apps so that, somebody that, a community member can take a look at their quality data in real time, using their cell phone. So I had the feeling that that's what, you meant, but, I'm also glad that we kind of tackled both aspect of mobile monitoring. So thank you.
All right, great discussion. And then I think one of the key elements, and you brought that up, Dr. Heibel, is the participation in bringing in the advertisement to bring in support for doing these, being community air scientists. What do you think in terms of how to gather that commitment and support to be those citizen scientists and active community air quality advocates?
Okay, I just want to make sure if it's the question directed for me, I don't want to step on anybody.
that is to you, because this is part of your community air monitoring, and you mentioned trying to, you're gathering the students and community members. Right. So I think part of that is securing that support, because I mean, with every element of community air monitoring, I mean, it's a multi-pronged effort of all of us working together. So in terms of how you structured your community air monitoring effort, trying to secure that support and commitment from those involved, I think that's important, super important element for making this successful.
Yes, and thank you so much. So just very briefly, because I know we have a lot of ground to cover. Absolutely, the community buy-in is key. So this is not just something that we can do as a sort of a quote unquote navel gazing academic exercise. We really are doing this. This is kind of for the community, by the community. We are a community college first. So again, our students are community members. The vast majority are next door neighbors in Colton and Fontana, Rialto, San Bernardino, and other surrounding communities. So our students are community members. They are part of the community. So I think that's first and foremost important. Many, of course, are faculty, staff, administrators as well. But of course, looking at whether that is a series of workshops that we have on campus where we have outreach, different days and times. We know our community is working around the clock. Make this as convenient as possible. Maybe that means a hybrid session where we have face-to-face meetings, but also Zoom enabled, really just to maximize that outreach. Non-credit courses are, not a perfect solution, but a way to get folks on campus to learn more about this free of charge, and really our students at the forefront, leading the charge. And not just passive recipients of knowledge, but really active agents, teachers, working with local environmental justice communities and organizations, of course, is key. And, to the extent possible, I think interfacing with our politicians, city, county, state, federal representatives is going to be kind of putting our money where our mouth is. And finally, that maybe this is a tough nut to crack, but certainly not impossible. Actually speaking to industries, maybe some of the industries that might be polluting industries, speaking with them. So if we have an intermodal facility, hey, can we talk about alternative fuel vehicles? I know we've got some other breakout sessions now talking about just that, but what kind of positive impacts can that have on the air quality? Dr. Zhu mentioned earlier about opening and closing windows, whole home filtration systems, public schools and residents as well. So there are kind of a lot of sort of smaller and larger scale activities. But again, as you say, Dr. Lowe, really just making sure we've got that community buy-in. So thank you.
Great, thank you. It's everybody buy-in, as you mentioned, and you mentioned elements of bringing in different elements, the other organizations, the cities, the industry, and you're kind of foreshadowing our next plenary session, which was AB 617, which does wrap a lot of that together. So thank you for that foreshadowing and advertisement of our AB 617 program. And you mentioned a lot about resources, trying to get the resources because, again, trying to put some additional financial burden is really difficult in these communities. So that kind of leads into our next question in terms of where can communities obtain an air monitor and what resources are available on how to use air monitors. And for this, I'll go to Dr. Polidori.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. And I think that, it seems that I think from the discussion we are having, one of the central points is that, community education is extremely important, finding the, useful, reliable information on how to select, use, and maintain a sensor or a sensor network is extremely important. And I think that to this end, mentioned before, I mentioned the aqspec, Air Quality Sensor Performance Evaluation Center website, and in there, we have multiple educational resources. One of them in particular is related to the EPA grant that Dr. Zhu was mentioning before. And essentially what it is an educational toolkit that includes, different tools. One of them is a sensor installation guide that is based on feedback provided by multiple community that we have been working with, in the past and we are working with now. It also includes different data visualization and mapping tools that basically support sensor data access, processing, analysis, and sensor data visualization. It includes, a very, useful and educational guidebook that is entitled Community in Action. Is essentially a comprehensive guidebook on air quality sensors and is intended to aid community members and community partners in effectively using low-cost sensors, establishing sensor network, and maintaining, sensor network to provide reliable data. In terms of, how community can obtain low-cost sensors devices, I think is appropriate also to mention that the South Coast aqmd is working on a library program. So, aqspec has been piloting a library program that will maintain and lend air quality sensors to community members and community groups. Through this program, members of the public will be able to request and borrow one or multiple low-cost air quality sensors, as well as material to guide the use of these devices and to support air quality and environmental educations. And I'll leave it at that. Back to you, Jason.
Great, thank you. And we dropped a few links into the chat, which includes the link to that guidebook and toolkit. So for those who would like to learn more, please access that link to find out all that great information. That does kind of lead into the next question in terms of the best practices for setting up community air monitors. And since that link provides kind of the South Coast aqmd and also includes actually UCLA, who helped with that effort as well. But I'll go to Dr. Zhu to respond to that.
Thank you, Jason. At first, I want to just echo what Dr. Hebel and Polidori have mentioned. I think in addressing environmental justice issues through the lens of using empowered communities to do air monitoring using local sensors, it's really team efforts. It really involves agencies like South Coast, academia, community members, and when we do those type of project together, we tend to think this is a community participatory engaged framework. The community members need to be involved at the very beginning when we even frame what we're trying to accomplish together. We have to co-design what works for the communities, right? Think through what resources we have, what air quality monitors, local sensors will best address the community needs. And engage the communities, empower them, educate them, and work with them, help interpret the data, and help to get the results broadly disseminated. I think this really involves teamwork, and I think together we can do a lot, just as the opening remark discussed. And best practice for setting community air monitors, I think there's lots of things to think through. I also want just to highlight one aspect that my group have observed. There's already a lot of local air sensors installed in Southern California, in Northern California, just in general. Like, for example, take Purple Air Sensor Network as example. There's already a lot of sensors out there, but those are adopted, like, sort of suffer something called like early adopter effects, meaning communities that have resources and households have disposable incomes, they will more likely to install local sensors in their backyard. What we found is really disturbing and challenging is the communities, the environmental justice communities, the neighborhoods that have the most serious air quality issues are the ones that don't have the resources, and there's a lack of local air sensors in those communities. So I think, you know, the best practice for setting up monitors, I think maybe we should think like one step back and how can we empower those communities to get the air monitors set up. So I'm so happy to see Andrew mentioned now there's a library program that can allow some communities really interested in piloting some of those local air monitoring setup to be, you know, employed and deployed to their communities. And so some of the best practice that we have learned, I think Andrew mentioned a couple of aspects. The power is a concern. Outdoor Wi-Fi is a concern. The project that we did is an 18-month air monitoring local sensor, and we as a academia, we only go into the field check periodically. We were not like hands-on day in, day out. So we let the sensor to be installed and maintained by the community members. But, you know, we found that the outdoor sensors lose more data than the indoor sensors. There's lots of power and Wi-Fi issues. And you know, in terms of setting up the monitors, I think there's also aspects just like the community needs to think about, and you know, also just tie into like how you interpret the data once you get it. Right? You don't want set up too close to a potential like a local, like not the source that you're concerned with, but you know, barbecue places, other things. Right? You want the monitor selection to be smart, and you also want the monitor to address the pollutant that you're interested in. And there's cost involved, and there's how the data really tell you, right? How does that, you know, lower, higher than what the nearby monitoring EPA or South Coast monitoring station tells you. So there's lots of things to share with the communities. And I think the two toolkits touch upon many aspects. So I really encourage the community members to go through it, and just don't hesitate to reach out to the district, to reach out to us. We'll be happy to work with you, to share our experience, and to help be the sort of like the interpreter between what the data really means, or how does it really translate into community health impacts.
Great, thank you. Would there be anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Heibel?
You know, can't add much else. I will tell you, Dr. Polidori, Dr. Zhu, thank you so much. Yeah, and Dr. Lowe, you know, just to kind of echo what you have all said. Again, that community buy-in is just key, and empowering community members, not just with free or very low-cost sensors, but also, yeah, so they're not overwhelmed with how to use the sensors, how to upload the data, so that it's meaningful. And again, thank you, Dr. Zhu, for mentioning all of those really important geographic or spatial aspects. Really, we've got to, get the sensors to where the people are and where, some of the most polluted areas. That's so important. And then one last thing, this was pre-pandemic, but we had a very successful, thanks to our colleagues at South Coast Air Quality Management District, we had a really successful community environmental justice workshop pre-pandemic. We would like to host another one on our campus. But in addition to that, we really need to have those follow-up meetings and workshops. In other words, really to answer the questions from the community. Okay, so what are you doing? Okay, so we're collecting these data, but what are we doing about it? How is air quality improving? And if it isn't, how do we go about that? So we are empowering communities to actually, show some results, as it were. So thank you.
No, and that's a perfect lead into the question, transitioning this data. So now, having the sensor air quality information, how to translate that into improving local air quality. So thank you for the great transition. And then Dr. Polidori, would you like to take the first stab at that one?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and a pretty complex one too. I think that there are several examples that point towards a potential solution that that maybe it's a good time, as an example, to bring out some of the activities and some of the the collaboration with communities that we've been developing through the AB 617 program, which is a state led program. And as part of the development and implementation of the program, my group is tasked with developing an air monitoring plan to address essentially the main air quality priorities in different communities. And to do this, we use different tools. Some of them are extremely sophisticated, but some of them are low-cost sensors and the development of low-cost sensor networks. There are a couple of good examples. One of them is in the San Bernardino area, and Dr. Abel has also been involved in some of this activity, and I'll take the opportunity to thank him for that. One of the other air quality network being developed is in the East Coachella Valley. And so, there is, we are starting to use these type of tools more and more to basically supplement all of the other air quality information that we already have, by means of using more, traditional air quality instruments and other tools. But I think, the central point keeps, the point always comes down to how good of a relationship, a district like ours, for example, and university and other groups, how good of a relationship we can establish with the community group that we work with, right? I think establishing trust is that is one of our, if not our top priority when working with community, but it takes time. And it's always a process that starts with listening to the community concerns and listening for quite a bit of time, because my group, for example, we are the expert when it comes to technology and with which type of technology to use. But if we do not have the information on what to use it for, what the communities would like to use this type of technology for, then a lot of these, efforts are, could be a waste, right? So I think, we have placed, a lot of, interest in trying to understand what the community need, why the community needed. And again, I think it cannot be stressed enough. I mean, the community are the expert, and that therefore community work always starts with listening, to what they have to say, and how basically we can start implementing some of the idea that they have. And the AB 617, honestly, is quite a good example of that.
Okay, thank you. Any closing thoughts on that, Dr. Zhu?
Yes, thank you. I think the most powerful aspect of those low-cost air sensors, so especially when it gets into the communities that you need, is to provide them hard evidence to really demonstrate or document there are elevated air quality, air pollution concentrations in their communities. I think the reason is because as we all know, the EPA stations are monitoring stations that South Coast operate. They're very sparse. Right, they're far away and they're purposely placed into major urban backgrounds, not specific sources. So if a community are concerned about nearby sources without monitoring data, all they can say is, we smell something, we think this source is emitting something really high at night that we're suffering, but without data evidence. But the monitors, those low-cost sensors, can provide such information to help the community make a stronger argument about the potential nearby sources they're really concerned about. And those data are powerful. They can really help communicate the level of exposures, the associated potential health effects, and it can make the community much stronger, provide much stronger cases to communicate back, to call Jason, call Andrea, to really explain their concerns. I really think they can empower the community in that aspect. Great. And if we have one more minute, I also want to say, even though I know this question is focusing on local air quality, but as mentioned earlier, the community members, well, it takes time, right, for the South Coast to address some local emission sources. The community members can do to take immediate actions in the event of, like, say, wildfires or some sources. They can really do something to mitigate their exposures and reduce exposures, translate into protecting health. So I think there's a really powerful usage for those low-cost sensors to help those community members to protect their health.
Great, thank you. Todd, we've got maybe a few seconds before we go back to the plenary session. So any quick closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, really just honored and a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of this conversation. And I really learned a lot. And again, just echoing the sentiments, we need to empower our community citizen scientists, and then also make this a living program, report back all the time, report. What is anything happening with air pollution? What's happening? And then also just making sure that community members, one last kind of piece of this puzzle is participate in local planning, green spaces, parks, green spaces around potentially polluting areas. And then Dr. Zhu and Dr. Polidori, you mentioned, again, the various geographies. So whether those are individual actions or community actions, it does take all of us. So thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you. And everybody, please join me in thanking our panelists for taking the time to share their thoughts and expertise on this super important topic on how we can make air quality data accessible to the public and help us make better and informed decisions about certain air pollutants and how to improve air quality in our communities. We will now return to the main room of our plenary session on the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program, Lessons Learned and Strategies for Positive Change, for which air quality sensors have played a role in some of those communities. Before you go, for those of you that are on WOVA, please check your devices for a quick 3-question survey about this session. We'd appreciate hearing your input about this session and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. We hope you'll stay to hear more about current environmental justice efforts in our region, and we'll see you in the main session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.